Hello, my name is Putkonen. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm talking about the simplicity of this moment. I think some people that are able to be very present discover this very quickly, perhaps, that when you are totally now, you're not thinking about the past, you're not thinking about the future, you're not daydreaming, you're not imagining. It simplifies the moment a great deal. Much of complexity is because of the mind. It's thought. We're constantly thinking about things and we make it complex. And then that goes further in that we try to do more than one thing at a time, although it is quite impossible. I know that some people claim that they are good multitaskers, but science and their research in multitasking has found it's not really it's kind of a misnomer. It's impossible to do more than one task at a time. When you're multitasking, what you're really doing is you're doing a little bit on one task, and then you're moving on to the next task and doing a little bit there, and then moving on to the next task and moving a little bit there, and you're just cycling through. And so it seems like you're doing three things, but in reality, you're just focusing on very short intervals, one thing at a time, and shifting through. And it's somewhat inefficient because they've found that if you can just focus on one thing, you kind of get into a groove and you're actually much faster. And so there has been research showing that multitasking is actually rather inefficient. But in the attempts to do more than one thing, we add a layer of complexity that doesn't really exist. It seems more complex because we're trying to do multiple things at once, even though it's impossible. I mean, you can kind of spread awareness in different directions, but when it comes to focus, you can really only focus on one thing at a time. And so you might have experienced, watching say you had a movie playing or something, and you're multitasking and looking at your emails or doing this, that, or the other thing. And you might notice that you haven't been watching the movie. You have no idea what has been going on for the last several minutes. And that's because the focus has moved to something else. And so in order to do something else, the focus has to be moved from the one task, and then you become unaware of what's going on over there. So the movie is no longer something within awareness. It's there as background noise, but you don't really understand or really know what's going on because you haven't been paying attention. But to pay attention is one thing at a time, really. What we can do physically is one thing at a time. And so if we stick with the idea of, well, let's just do one thing at a time, and you're very, very present, so you're only concerned with the now becomes a very simple thing. The now is very simple. The simplicity is in that there is only one thing. There's not a bunch of moving parts. There might be, a bunch of stuff going on, but if you have the wisdom to know what you should be aware of, and you have the wisdom to do the right action at the right time, really it's a very simple thing. We make it complex. We see all the stuff going on, and we try to keep track of it all, which is impossible. And so we need to perhaps play with, it's not the right word, but making things uncomplex. De-complexing isn't really a word, but if you're making it less or uncomplex, that is the key. Notice when you are making things much more complex than they need to be. If you are stuck and you just have this sense of there's too much stuff going on, you need to return to stillness, return to the moment. And in the moment, the question is, what can I do right now? If there's nothing you can do, it doesn't really help to fixate on it and worry about what might happen, because you can't do anything about it anyway. But if you go back in stillness and in the moment, you go, what can I do now? And either you can do something, in which case go do it, or you can't do anything, in which case don't worry about it. And it's kind of, you may find it kind of interesting if you try to, become aware, always kind of watch out as an experiment for when things are becoming very complex. And realize this complexity is self-inflicted. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of thought, a lot of past involved. It's all in the head. The now, right here, never has a ton going on if you really look at it. Some might consider it dull because they think a lot should be going on. They might crave complexity. But the moment right now is very simple. There's not a lot going on. I mean, I'm taking a quick break right now. And I'll be returning to work in a moment. But it is not very complex. I'm sitting here, I'm talking about, I think, an interesting topic and observation, and maybe an experiment to try to, kind of like how people talk about decluttering your life. How about decomplexing your life? Reduce the complexity. Let all that go and just try to get more to the moment where things are far more simple. You either do or not do. You're aware of something or you're not aware of something. There's not a lot to it. It's only when we're trying to move very fast or do a lot of different things and basically go beyond what is actually possible to do that we get lost in the complexity, and we're just like, oh, there's just too much to keep track. Do you really need to keep track of it all? That's a fundamental question some people don't bother asking. Do you need to keep track of it all? What do you really need to keep track of? What is really vital or important in the game of life or whatever you're doing? I mean, I need to keep track of candidates that I'm recruiting and where they are in the process. And so I periodically will check to see where they are in the process. And I make sure they keep moving forward. But there's never that many candidates in process. I mean, there's only so many people that the hiring manager or I can interview. There are only so many bills that come in, and I just aggregate them all together, and once or twice a month I pay them all. I don't worry about looking at every bill as they come in. I don't worry about looking at every email as they come in. It's not particularly important to be perfectly up to date with your email or text messages. But if you've got this idea in your head that I must never have anything waiting on me, I must have everything up to date all the time. Well, if you're doing many things at once, you've got a job, you've got a family, you've got other things going on, maybe church activities, next thing you know, you go, man, there's just so much going on, it's so very complex. Well, you did that to yourself. You're trying to keep up to date with more than what is humanly possible. And so you have various options. You can try to batch things together. Let's go, okay, I don't need to be up to date as I have been. I don't need to be up to minute up to date. I can just look at my messages once or twice a day and the rest of the day ignore them. And again, research in organization and things like that has found batching, that's what they call it. Batching is a way to streamline things, and it is quicker to batch. It takes far longer to look at every email and message throughout the day than to just once or twice a day take care of all the messages that have accumulated up until that point. It's much faster to batch because we're more efficient if we do a bunch of the same thing at once. Again, multitasking is inefficient. Instead of looking at the messages, looking at an email, then looking at an instant message, and then getting back to what you're doing, and then you get another instant message, and go back to the instant message, then you get an email, go back to the email. And some people blow their work days like this, constantly jumping all over the place. And it's better to batch. You need to just say, hey, I am only going to look at my email. I mean, even if it's 4 times a day, just go every 2 hours, or even if you did 8 times a day, you just go every hour I'll look at my email. I don't think you need to do it that much, but you can go every hour I'll look at my email. Everything can wait at least an hour. And in that way, you are batching this stuff together, and there's less distraction, and then you can spend more time focused on a task and moving. And in this way, it does decomplex or make things less complex because you're not being pulled in all these different directions, and there's not all these moving parts. Now it's more simple. It's like I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, and there's a more of a simplicity because now you're doing one thing at a time. You're only trying to be aware of one thing at a time. And much of this talk is actually, I'm focusing it more on everyday living, kind of a practical talk, I guess. But, we need to be aware of how we're making things more complex and how we're jumping around and thinking about past and future and making things much bigger than they are. And if you go very, very, you turn everything down in terms of letting go of past, future imaginations, just focus this moment. This very moment. What am I going to do? What to do now? It's very simple. There's not a lot going on in the moment. The moment, you can find quite a bit of stillness and silence and peace in the moment. Just being here. And I'm going to consider this the end of my quick break and go back to work. But anyways, if you got any questions, comments, please post below. But until next time, thank you much.